Seeing no one in queue, I will close the public comment at this time. Normally, we would have information from external entities. We do not have any tonight, so we are going to proceed to recommended actions. Before we launch into this evening's scheduled recommended actions and discussions, I want to point out to all those assembled a new element of our committee agenda. Many of you have likely seen that the published agenda included time guidelines for our recommended actions and discussions. These time guidelines are both for presentations, if any from staff, as well as corresponding question and answer discussion from the committee. This change supports following recent addition we made to our operating guidelines regarding meeting efficiency. That is, to allow the meeting chair to make specific time allotments to agenda items and ensure the meeting is being conducted according to those time allotments. As such, I'm going to do my best to hold us to these time allotments, and I ask the committee members and the board office staff to please help keep us on track as well. While these are not rigid timeline allotments, they have been coordinated with staff and committee leadership and should closely mirror the time we need to fully engage on a given topic. We will continue to refine these in the months ahead, so know that I remain committed to directors getting all their questions answered and their concerns addressed. Additionally, our work plan has been updated following coordination with agency leadership, the board office, Chair Bouquet, the leadership of Operations Safety and Security Committee. Because the bylaws define the role of the Finance and Planning Committee as being responsible for agency financial matters, including but not limited to asset management and capital projects. Given the clear definition in our bylaws, we have pulled into our work plan items for June and July that were originally slated for the Operations, Safety, and Security Committee. Notably, these items pertain to asset management and capital projects. I would like to thank General Manager CEO Johnson, Deputy CEO Peña, CFO Mackey, as well as Directors Rusha and Harwick for recognizing the need to make these changes to better align with the board structure. I also want to thank the committee's membership for taking on additional work in the months ahead. With that, we have 3 recommended actions on the agenda this evening. The first action is for the authorizations for General Manager and CEO regarding the Central Park development. For the Board of Directors to authorize the General Manager and CEO or her designee to negotiate and execute one or more option agreements, ground leases, and other documents related to the development of the real property located at 3801 North Ulster Street, Denver, Colorado. From now on, we'll call that the property, with Ulysses Development Group. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Thank you so much. I have the motion, the movement as Director Banker and the second as Director Larson. I would like to turn over the meeting at this point to Deputy CEO Angel Peña, Deputy Chief Executive Officer, and Chessie Brady, Manager of Transit-Oriented Development, to present the item to this committee. Mr. Peña.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Guzman. So yeah, this time I just would like to invite Chessie Brady, Manager of Transit-Oriented Development, to present this item on behalf of the team.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be back again, speaking to you this evening about Central Park development. So 1 month ago, or really just a few weeks ago, this board approved an amendment to the equitable TOD policy, and right away we're going to actualize that that policy at this station, or I'm proposing that we do so. So to ground us in the project at hand, on Ulster Street, as mentioned, is the proposed site, the westernmost parcel of Central Park Station Park and Ride. It's about a 6-acre site, and it appraised about a year and a half ago for about $20 million. Notably on this site, the parking utilization has been low for some time. Even prior to COVID, it was at around 50%, and in 2024, only 17%. So about 260 cars customers parking on a daily basis in these 1,500 parking spaces. The site is zoned for high density mixed use up to 16 stories, has a lot of potential. There's a lot of development going on all around the site, just west, it being just west of Stapleton Central Park. So Ulysses Development Group has proposed for this site a really ambitious program of over 500 mixed income rentals, about more than half of which would need to be below 60% of area median income. They propose to ground lease the parcel, remove the transit spaces, parking spaces that are not being used, and meet RTD operations and maintenance requirements, and also improve general access to the station. They have been working on this project actually, or we've been speaking since 2021. And they formally began the process in 2023. And that process is the unsolicited proposal procedure for joint development of real property, which we can just call the UPP. They submitted that initial request in February 2023. We reviewed it for technical feasibility at the staff level, and then went out for alternate proposals through an RFQ in November 2023. The board approved the proposal and authorized staff to enter into an exclusive negotiation agreement just exactly a year ago, and we did execute that agreement in 2024. And that agreement, so the agreement that we're operating under at the moment is that exclusive negotiation agreement, and what we're seeking to do now is request your authorization on an option that will allow options, additional options, and then multiple ground leases on the site. So the ENA that we're currently operating under was executed in September. It has a 2-year term. It requires RTD to negotiate with the Ulysses Development Group, or UDG, to the exclusion of other developers. UDG has paid RTD, or deposited $100,000 in a budget line from which RTD can use funds to pay for engineering review, outside design review, any costs that might be incurred by the agency in the course of getting this project done. We have the ability or the right to approve and review and approve designs, and also under the ENA, the development must advance the equitable TOD policy. And of course, the last 2 months, we've talked about the equitable TOD policy a number of times. We've amended it, and what we haven't talked about as much is the bigger picture TOD policy, which preexisted. So in 2018, this board approved the evaluation guidelines for all TOD, whether it's market or affordable. And the principles that any development oriented towards transit on RTD property must adhere to are what you see on the left, and the factors on which we will evaluate it are on the right. So Central Park, as a at least 500 unit development of underutilized land, will increase revenues. It will be budget positive. It will increase ridership. It is a ground lease rather than a sale, which is what the policy calls for. It abides by parking rules, maintains safety and security, and it has Denver's support. It also meets all of the factors, and scores positively, so to speak, on those factors. I will pause here for a moment to talk about the ground lease versus sale, since this has been a question that's come up a few times in the over the past 2 months. The board over many years made a very clear determination to preference ground lease over sale, almost to the point of not permitting sales unless it's absolutely infeasible for a project to go forward. And the reasons for that are various. One is that they're not making any more land, and the land that RTD has often is used for transit purposes, or is expected to be able to be used for transit purposes in the future. And so maintaining control of that land, but also benefiting from a ground lease on top of it, has been seen as a win-win for the agency. Additionally, TOD is generally happening at transit stations, and maintaining the integrity and safety of operations adjacent to development on a ground lease is more conducive to, operating the system than if we were to sell it and release all rights over that property. Also, the FTA contributed to many of the acquisitions for the land that RTD owns, and in order to maintain compliance with FTA policy, we need to retain quote unquote satisfactory continuing control. And the best way to maintain, or the easiest way to maintain satisfactory continuing control, is to have a ground lease. And again, that way we're able to get value for the community. You know what? I'm wondering if you're seeing the right slide, because my screen is showing the TOD evaluation guidelines. May I ask if that's what's showing on your screen?
It's now
Now
you're
it
on
is.
TOD evaluation. Yes.
Oh,
So, Ms. Brady, was there a slide before this? There was another comparative slide that we didn't get to see. I was having a hard time tracking that too.
so
Just look at it for just a second.
yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I was driving, and here I see that I am not. Okay, so this is the exclusive negotiation agreement, the terms of that, and this is the what we're currently operating under. And you have this in your packet. Okay, next slide, please. So these are the principles that we're adhering to, the project being budget positive, increasing ridership, etc. These are the factors that the projects are being evaluated on. I can come back to any of this if there's more questions. I don't want to spend extra time. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. So you're all familiar with the equitable TOD policy. We have spent a lot of time on it in the last 2 months. It does allow a negotiated land price up to a 75% reduction at this point. And that will apply to Central Park. Next slide, please. Okay, so as applied to Central Park Station, the equitable TOD policy would have likely a 30% to 50% reduction. And so on a 6-acre site, it's about $20 million in value. We're looking at a 30% reduction. We're talking about a $14.5 million would be a sale value. In this case, we're talking about a ground lease, about $840,000 a year. A 50% reduction would mean $10 million or about $600,000 a year. That's based on pretty back of the napkin math there, but the point being that a 30% reduction is very much achievable for this project, and across the entire project, it's possible it could reach 50%. We'll get more into it in the next slides. Next slide, please. So the next step is to execute an option agreement. This would be done in order to allow a phased development. While it would be simpler to execute one ground lease and require at least 500 units on that ground lease, it is not possible to finance a 500-unit affordable income restricted development in one go. Those developments are typically 150 to 250 units. And so in order to maximize the number of units and affordability levels on the site, a phasing is beneficial to the project and to RTD. Under this process, RTD will grant UDG an option to enter into multiple ground leases, and then each ground lease will correspond to a project phase. Just for illustrative purposes, we have a possible kind of concept and potential phasing. Whether it's 2, 3, or 4 phases is not determined at this point, but I would imagine it's one of those 3. And then as each project is able to be financed, it can be, we'll execute a ground lease. Next slide, please. In order to actually execute one of those ground leases, Ulysses and RTD have to agree on the location. So where on the site, which part of the site is actually applying for this, the size of it, both in square footage and in height, the term, probably 99 years, and the affordability. Though again, the site as a whole has to hit that minimum of 250 units below 60% AMI. And then Ulysses has to get their construction and financing approvals. We have to agree on the appraisal and then agree on other ground lease terms and conditions. And those terms might include, for example, being able to take back a project if 45 years from now, the developer is not maintaining the housing to standards that are approved by RTD. Next slide, please. So again, illustrative image here of a possible phase one on Central Park Station, about 150 rental apartments. 100% of this phase one would be income restricted, so no market rate, between 30 and 70% AMI. Ulysses will be looking to the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, CHFA, for financing. Hosts with the City of Denver, Department of Housing, Colorado, DOLA, they will be looking under all of the couch cushions to find the coins to get every phase of this project done. Next slide, please. And so again, how would that ETOD policy impact this, phase one of this? If, I don't know, just as, again, back of the napkin math here, if it's a $20 million parcel and it's divided in 4, the first phase might be $5 million at a 30% reduction, which is what we'd anticipate for the first phase. That would be $3.5 million. But there would definitely be opportunities for a deeper discount if they start meeting the values that the board set forth in the policy. If they're able to offer deeper affordability, if they push the parking ratio, if they provide that small retail footprint or add additional accessible units, there's potential to increase that reduction. I think to set minds at ease, or to kind of square us with the
I'm
up
sorry.
to
I'm sorry, Ms. Brady. Mr. Chair, I apologize for interrupting. I'm not a member of the body. Is it okay if we ask folks to slow down just a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. That way the transcriptionist can keep up would be helpful. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Sure. I am sorry for talking too fast. I think that the point here is that there are opportunities for deeper discounts if the developer meets those other requirements in the policy. But this is not the kind of project, this is not certainly not the kind of phase that's going to get up to that 75% in my mind, because it's very much not maximizing density, for example. Now that's not for fault of the developers. I think they would very much like to build 16 stories. I would like them to build it, but the financing is not available to do that. And so especially by breaking it into phases, we can get as much housing as possible. But it's not going to hit that kind of mark, and it's not going to be a very, very deeply affordable project, which will also, keep the reductions within, I would say, that 30 to 50% range. Next slide, please. So our next steps, pending board approval, would be for Ulysses to apply for tax credits on August 1st. Those tax credits are done in annual cycles, more or less. And that's part of the reason that we're here tonight, is that in order to apply for tax credits, developers need to have site control. And an option agreement is one manner of proving that site control to CHFA in order for the developer to be eligible for tax credits. So that's part of the goal this month, is to get the project ready to actually make those applications. If awarded, Ulysses would then go through Denver's development review process, secure their additional financing, and then probably 2026, start meeting all those ground lease requirements I mentioned earlier and that are part of this authorization. We execute that first phase and off they go. And while that first phase is in process, we can start planning for the next phases. So that's it. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, and very happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ms. Brady. I would invite directors to raise your hand if you have questions or comments. I do see Director Larson's hand is raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask what kind of I guess preparation do we have for if the developer, something goes wrong, like they don't get those tax credits or they're not able to move forward with the project? What will we do then? Or what are we prepared to do then? Thanks.
Sure. May I
Go ahead,
respond?
Ms. Lee.
Thank
Yes.
you. Um, if the developer is not able to secure the financing, then we will not execute a ground lease, and we'll be in the same situation we are now, and have potential to go out again and find another developer. But we are hoping to work with this development team. We do have confidence in them, and are hoping to be flexible and be able to get to the finish line if we see that the finish line is there. If it starts to disappear, then we drop out and work with another team.
Thank you. I do want to note for the record, we were joined by Director Chris Guchenrieder at 5:40 p.m. and Director Geisinger at 5:42 p.m. Thank you for joining us. I know it was hard to switch from one meeting to another, even for myself. So you are here and I'm happy to see your faces. The next in line was Vice Chair Banker. Excuse me. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Jesse, from the slides that you have, it said that in 2019, we had approximately 750 cars were parking there, correct? Right? I'm understanding this correctly?
Yes.
And, okay, and once this entire development is finished, there will only be 870 cars left, or spaces that would be left. So it seems like it's pretty close. So one, I'm a little bit concerned about losing all those parking spaces, because I do think in the next couple of years, we're going to have more riders and it's going to be higher use. Will there still be room there to build a parking garage if we need to? Will there be a plot of land where we can do that? Because park and rides have been very useful in the past. I know currently they're not well used, but I think once we get our ridership numbers up, you're going to see park and rides numbers also going up. So what are your thoughts?
Thank you. You're correct. In 2019, pre-COVID, about 50% of the spaces were used, about half. Right now, about 260 customers are parking there on a daily basis, and 650 spaces are proposed to be removed. So there would still, if the parking returns to pre-COVID levels, then there would still be enough spaces for those customers. And yes, we are proposing to lease only the westernmost site of Central Park Station Park and Ride, which leaves 3 additional sites on which you could build a parking structure. 2 of them more reasonably than the other one, but certainly there's land potential for that future possibility.
I just want to make sure that our transit customers are always going to be served. And I know we've had this discussion, well, just recently, affordable housing versus transit. And I know it's a balance, but I'm also hoping that, we're going to be filling up those parking lots. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Banker. Director O'Keefe, you are a member of the committee. I'm calling on you next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to note that the comment from Greater Denver Transit that you referenced, the early part of the session, talks about a specific bus stop, and they're asking for an improvement to be considered there, as well as the things that we're doing for the A-line connection. And so I just asked that we consider that. It seemed like a reasonable request. And I know when we're thinking TOD, it's usually, trains come first to mind, but in this case, it's pretty heavy bus use in that part of town too. Not my district, so I'm sorry for intruding on what I think is Director Rush's, but it seemed like a reasonable request from them. So thank you for just taking a look at it and giving consideration.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Director Nicholson, I did not realize you joined us as well, so I want to make sure that I note you are here for the record. Madam CEO, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very kindly, Deborah Johnson, General Manager and CEO. Thank you, Vice Chair O'Keefe, for your comments. And I just wanted to say in reference to looking at transit amenities and things of the like, while that could be incorporated in with this transit-oriented development, I wanted to ensure that we'll manage expectations, recognizing that this part is of service delivery. And of course, there would be cross-pollination amongst the business units. So I wanted to ensure that that onus of that didn't fall with Miss Brady, but we would look at that holistically. So I just wanted to state that for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. I just keep in time, y'all. We have about 10 minutes left in this discussion, so let's land our planes. Director Nicholson, your hand was up first, and I will give Director Rusha the final word as this is her district. So let's hop to.
Thank you. So I just had a couple questions for staff. First question, this is right by because this is Central Park Station, yes?
Yes.
Yes. So this is, so Central Park, obviously there's what was I going to ask? Will this location have, will the building be required to have eco passes for all residents in the location? Is that going to be a requirement of the projects?
Ms. Brady.
So the way we've handled NECO passes in the past, so neighborhood eco passes for residential buildings, would be to strongly encourage it. We're the NECO Pass program could change over 99 years of a ground lease, and so it wouldn't make sense for us to require it for that kind of term. But generally speaking, developers are very much in favor of incorporating that in the first few years, and we would be happy to require them to do so for the first few years. I think it's also reasonable to do that and see how it's working for that particular residential population against cost, and make decisions from there. But it's also on, I mean, we're in Denver, it's part of Denver's TDM requirements, their transportation demand management. So it will be one of many TDM strategies that we would strongly encourage, if almost require, or potentially require on the project.
No. Second question, the parking that is around the parcel, is that the resident parking for that parcel? And is that also available for individuals who are driving to the station, or is it going to be segmented off?
So I think what you're discussing is the sort of remaining parking if we're using ground lease on phase one. Then we would anticipate that some of that parking would be used for laydown during construction, would be under a separate temporary lease or like construction license. And then if phase two is slow to come, then we would work out an agreement with the developer to whatever is the best, to the benefit of the agency to maintain that parking for transit users while it's still available. The building itself would be self-parked. We would not anticipate that residents would be parking in the unleased portion of the 6-acre parcel.
Got it. So there's other parking that's in the capacity for.
Yes.
Okay. Final question. With regard to the additional opportunities that they could have to push from 30% up to 50 or 75, obviously recognizing that, like you said, they'd be scrounging under every couch cushion. When it comes to opportunity, where do you see of the available opportunities, whether that is, the reduced parking ratio or maybe accessible units, that you think that they would be most interested in pursuing, or where are you going to push to try to get opportunities? What of what's available, what do you think is the most likely to for them to be willing to pursue to increase that discount?
That's a great question. I would love to elaborate at length, but noting that we're under time constraints, I think the parking would be tough because they're probably going to push it as far as Chaffa will allow. They are going to require a certain amount of parking for the, to go along with the tax credit project, and so they'll be limited in that respect. I think I believe that they can provide more accessible units than required by law. So I think that that's very reasonable, and we can see how far they can push that. They intend to incorporate an early childhood center. That's not a retail center, but maybe there's a small footprint retail next to that. So I think that, and there are a lot of, little areas where they can push, and we'll encourage them to do so. And they should be motivated, incentivized to do so based on the potential for reduction in ground lease rent.
Great, thank you.
All right. Director Rusha, your hand was up, but you have taken it down. Did you want to opine here? All right. With no further comment at this point, I will ask if there are any no votes on this recommended action from the committee. I do not see any, so that passes. Looks like we have all 7 votes for that one. So that will go on unanimous consent to the board at the end of the month. Thank you. Jack. Sorry, Mr. Kroll.
Yeah, no worries, Director Guzman. I just wanted to note that Director
Thank you.
Kaplan is absent, so it's 6.
Six votes.
But the item would still go to the consent agenda regardless.
Thank you. Sorry, quick math. All right. Thank you very much. The second action that we have on our agenda tonight is the Kalamath Rail Reconstruction Project Contract Award. It is for the Board of Directors to authorize the General Manager and CEO or her designee to enter into a contract with Railworks Partners LP, after spoken to as Railworks, for the full-depth reconstruction of the Kalamath Light Rail intersection in downtown Denver in an amount not to exceed $3,585,990. Well, that's a mouthful. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Yeah.
Second.
I have the movement as Director O'Keefe, the second as Geisinger. I would like to ask again, Deputy CEO Angel Peña and Jyotsna Vishwakarma, Acting Assistant General Manager of Capital Programs, to present this item to the committee. Mr. Peña.
Thank you, Chair Guzman. At this time, to support our priorities of community value and the strategic initiative Back to Basics, which focuses on maintaining a suitable repair to ensure system reliability in the long term, I would like to invite Jyotsna Vishwakarma, Assistant General Manager of Capital Programs, to present this item for the committee's consideration.
Thank you, DCEO Peña. As introduced, I am Jyotsna Vishwakarma, Acting Assistant General Manager, Capital Programs. The proposed recommended action to reconstruct rail at Kalamath intersection in downtown Denver is included on page 20 of your agenda package. This item requests board approval of a contract not to exceed approximately $3.6 million for the reconstruction of the light rail infrastructure at the Kalamath intersection in Denver. Much like the intersections that were reconstructed as part of phase 1 of the downtown rail reconstruction project that took place in 2024, this rail segment is nearly 30 years old and is in need of full reconstruction to ensure safe and reliable service and to safeguard taxpayers' investments in the transit system. The project covers approximately 700 linear feet of double track and is related to the future downtown rail reconstruction work presented to the board in March of this year by the general manager and CEO. The intent is to start work in late fall of this year to stay on schedule with the overall downtown improvements. This project supports the strategic priority of community value and the strategic initiative of Back to Basics, which focuses on maintaining a state of good repair to ensure long-term system reliability. The project is fully funded, and the construction timing is coordinated to avoid overlap with other major downtown work. And with that, I am joined by Assistant General Manager of Rail Operations, Dave Jensen, for any questions you might have for this item.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Vishwakarma, I am so sorry I mispronounced your name, and I will do better, I promise. But at this time, are there any questions from the committee members or comments on this matter? Vice Chair Benka, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Yes, I see construction is supposed to be starting September 2nd and will go for approximately 3 months. So could you tell me, is this going to be on and off construction, or are you going to be shutting down the rail line and just getting it done? Are they just going to be working at night? How is the work? When is the work going to be accomplished?
Madam CEO?
Yes, thank you. I will start and then yield to members of the team. What I will share, going back to the discussion that ensued on Saturday when we gathered for our board retreat, I was talking about the importance of asset renewal, and I made reference to our impending service change that will be taken up for your consideration as we look at that as a discussion item. Actually tomorrow, and then a recommended action. We're incorporating in mitigations relative to ensuring that this work can be continuous. So we're looking at realignment of our rail network in the downtown core. I will be providing greater detail of that undertaking at the board meeting the latter part of this month. But simply put, this will be continuous, just as we did phase 1 of the downtown rail reconstruction. We want to ensure that we can get in and get out and minimize impact to the riding public, recognizing if we were, we would really decrease our maintenance envelope if we had to power down and go back in and go back out. That wouldn't be conducive. So we are optimizing efficiencies just as it is common practice throughout rail networks going forward. So I will yield the floor to Mr. Jensen to talk more about specificity as relates to that operation as we go forward, but don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because you will have to take that under consideration as you consider service changes. So I just wanted to preface that it's not a fait accompli, but that's what we're looking to do. So Mr. Jensen, the floor is yours, sir.
So Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
Not much more to add other than the complexity of the work that's going to be done would require full depth replacement, which means full removal of the tracks in existence now. So the ability for us to pull all of the tracks out and put them right back in for service that next day is just not feasible and workable. So it will be a full closure. And as Ms. Johnson indicated, we'll update the board on the specificity of the operation, I think, at a later time.
Okay, thank you. Is that possible then that it might be completed sooner since it's going to be continuous work? Are they also going to be working at night? Do you know?
If I may.
Yes.
Yes, thank you very kindly. So there always is the possibility contingent on weather conditions and things of the like. We saw that with the first phase, but keeping in mind that we're going to be working with our partners with the city and county of Denver, and we have to get permits and things of the like. It's really working in tandem with our jurisdictional partners going forward. And so basically there are noise ordinances relative to how that work may be conducted. So with that as the backdrop, I really believe Ms. Vishwakarma can answer that question. But considering that the permit comes through the city and county of Denver and certain times of night, there are restrictions. And in some instances, we could be granted a waiver contingent upon the decibel levels. But Ms. Vishwakarma, can you expound?
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. You covered it. So there are a multitude of factors to consider, as you explained. Noise ordinances, the work crew that the contractor has and the work to be done. We might also run into the possibility of adverse weather. So these are all factors we will be juggling as to make the projected schedule.
Right, but there's still then a possibility, it hasn't been decided completely whether or not it would be a 24-hour operation. So if you could work longer hours, then I assume the project could be completed quicker?
Theoretically, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to note for the record, we have been joined by Director Peggy Catlin. Ms. Johnson and Mr. Peña, both of your hands are up. Okay, sorry. Go, Mr. Peña, go ahead.
Yes, Director Banker, I also want to assure you and to everybody here at the board that as we do the work, we're going to ensure that we're communicating the progress of the work. Okay, so you know where we are, how the work is progressing, and that will help us to give us a good touch point of what's happening, how we're progressing, how we're working with the city, how that's happening. We're taking into account many things, such as events, right? So all of that are factors that we gotta take in, but you have our commitment, and I defer to Mrs. Johnson, that we will be communicating everybody, how we're doing on the progress of this work. And when we're completing, and if we see that we're have any challenges, we'll also can be transparent about it. And if we don't, and we get this work done earlier, we also will keep you apprised.
Thank you, that's wonderful, I appreciate that.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just really quickly, Mr. Peña reminded me of something. We're going to mimic what we did last year with the first phase because we had great success. We had a dedicated web page and we were sending updates to this body. And so we will be doing the same thing. And I recognize that some board members weren't here, but I just wanted to amplify Mr. Peña's commitment because we think that's quite important. And I was giving frequent updates on a monthly basis. Once we started construction, I gave those during the course of my general manager's report during the course of the full-fledged board meeting as well. So I just wanted to further explain what we meant by keeping you all apprised. So thank you. I'll yield the floor, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. Great question, Vice Chair Banker. I appreciate that one. Director Guchenrieder.
Thank you. And I don't think I missed it, but if I did, sorry. So is this a fixed cost bid from Railworks? I'm just asking that because it says an amount not to exceed 3.5 million. And I just, things come up sometimes and there's the potential for overages. And would they just stop work or was it a fixed cost bid?
Chair, may I?
Please.
So the contract authority we are requesting includes a fixed price bid by the contractor based on detailed plans that were prepared and also an amount of contingency. So things do come up in construction that require us to do change orders or adjustments, and they would be adjusted within this maximum not to exceed limit at this time.
Thank you. And then I'm just curious what the contingency percentage was, if you recall.
It's 20% within this resolution.
Okay.
It's based on our risk profile of the project.
Thank you.
Did you have anything further, Director Guchenrieder? Okay. I have some questions. Anybody else before I go? Okay. I'm not sure. I'm kind of looking at our CEO and our deputy CEO on this one. But in terms of doing this type of work, thank you for letting us know that you would be working with us and using the website. Part of the rail reconstruction last year through areas of downtown also was our communications office reaching out and engaging with community that would be directly affected by those closures and by that work. Is that plan in place going forward for this as well? I realize where this track is at. There are some businesses, the campus, the major streets and avenues that we're working along are quite different than working in the downtown corridor, but still heavily affected by this type of work and construction. And given the weather that can be tricky in September and November, there's a lot to consider there. So I'm satisfied that we will be fine with the city and county of Denver and working with them, just concerned about that particular length of track and where it's located. Are we set to have a good preemptive communication strike and then continual throughout this project so that we ensure that we are keeping our neighbors informed and being good partners with the folks along that corridor. Madam CEO.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And quite naturally, with any capital improvement project or a capital project as a whole, one critical component is the public participation and recognizing that you do have the Auraria campus, and I can name other entities, i.e. the convention center. This would be done from whole cloth in the sense of having a very in-depth construction communications engagement plan. Mr. Summers is on camera and can speak to that with greater specificity. I will iterate once again that I will be coming before this body at the end of the month during the course of the board meeting outlining what we are doing, and we'll have that encapsulated. But with Mr. Summers being here and off camera, I will yield the floor to him to give a thumbnail sketch of what we have in store, but we could provide greater detail toward the end of the month that will really set the stage for our service modifications to accommodate, as well as other work that we've been doing, because we've yielded such great success and were applauded by all of our stakeholders and our partners in this, that we are going to capitalize on the lessons that we learned and enhance those successes that we were able to implement. So with that, Mr. Summers, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. So a couple quick things. We will do a similar approach to what we did during phase one. One thing to note is following phase one last fall, we did an after action review of the communications and engagement. We have about 350 tactics that are individual tactics already identified ahead of the launch of this project, which will include outreach to businesses and stakeholders, similar to what we did last year. We'll also do a paid media campaign, an earned media campaign, and an owned media campaign. We'll have the website, we'll do social media. We have, like I mentioned, about 350 individual tactics underway ahead of this. And we've already started to do outreach to some of those constituent groups, community-based organizations, really to make sure that they're well aware of the project coming. And then as we get information buttoned up following these board meetings, we'll go out with some more specificity, maps, detours, plans, so that they can understand what will be happening in real time, and then keep them updated throughout the project.
Okay, thank you. In addition to that, so stay on with me for just a moment. I would like to know one of the common complaints that we received the last round of these type of work were from our regular customer writer constituents that are on board and were frustrated by immediate changes in service that they weren't aware about, or sudden changes in service that interrupted the regular travel path. So do we have contingency plans to help people shift modes, meaning move from a light rail train to a bus if necessary during these construction phases to ensure that we can get them to their destination? Given the smaller length of this track and what we have just been through over the summer, I find it necessary to request, if we do not have that ready to go, that we really put some thought and effort into identifying how we're going to do that and work with all of our possible solutions to this before we begin this. That way we can ensure continual service. Because I think we did a great job with what we could, knowing that things changed so suddenly, but this is something that we're planning and we don't want to inflict a self-injury. So I know we are but one RTD, as our CEO is wont to say, and so I want to make sure that I point that out. I guess that would be including, My Ride app, any kind of electronic information, and ensuring that we have all available hands on deck to do that.
Mr. Chair, if I quickly may, one thing that we will be doing that we didn't do as much last year, but we found some success with the Auraria campus, we want to expand it beyond that, is creating custom maps for different activity centers and key event centers, so that individuals can understand the other methods and modes of transportation to reach that center. So if, light rail is not their best option, the bus can still get you there, and helping them understand where that stop is located, the frequency of those routes, and the times and departures. So those are some things we have in mind. It also is important to note that last summer we had the coping panels project and the speed restrictions at the same time. So it was a constantly evolving challenge with service. And so this summer, or this fall, we're not anticipating having those multiple different disruptive activities all at the same time, creating that perfect storm.
I do appreciate that. I have been bludgeoned quite a bit by the public for saying, if you're going to choose the method that is going to take the longest, you need to be prepared and take a book. And so I want to make sure that we're not having to say that again. I want to make sure that we can say we can just get you where you need to be and put that to bed. Finally, thank you. I do have a question for Ms. Mackey. CFO Mackey, the finances for all of this are squared away and good, both for the marketing, paid media, and for the project. It's already part of our budget, correct? We don't have to worry about further allocation unless there is a major interruption to the construction, correct?
Yes, that is my understanding. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'm going to ask, are there any no votes on this matter? I see no votes. That means 7 votes. We have unanimity. Thank you so much for helping us stay on time. We're a little bit early, which is great. That will go to the board as a unanimous consent item. All right. Third and final action for this evening. We have the light rail operating facilities and security command center replacement HVAC contract award. This is for the board of directors to authorize the general manager and CEO or her designee to enter into a contract with Jacor Inc. for the replacement of heating, ventilation, and air conditioning HVAC equipment at the Ilari and Mariposa light rails facilities and the Security Command Center with a total not to exceed the amount of $3,510,598. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
I have the movement as Director Catlin and the second as Director O'Keefe. I would once again like to ask Deputy CEO Angel Peña and to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair Guzman. To further advance our priorities of employee ownership and maintaining the safe and reliable facilities, I would like to invite Jyotsna Vishwakarma once again to present this action item, please.
Thank you, DCEO Peña. I see Mr. Nicholson has his hand raised for quite a while. Is it okay if I proceed?
Yes, please proceed. I believe that he has his hand raised in anticipation of this conversation being over, so he can lower it now while you present, and then we will call for directors to raise their hands after you are done. Go ahead, Ms. Vishwakarma.
Thank you. So again, I am Jyotsna Vishwakarma, Acting Assistant General Manager for Capital Programs. The proposed contract award is outlined in page 22 of your agenda package. This recommended action seeks approval of a contract not to exceed approximately $3.5 million to replace heating and cooling systems at the Ilati and Mariposa light rail facilities and the Security Command Center. The current HVAC systems, which stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, including boilers, chillers, ventilation, and cooling units, are past their useful life and need replacement to avoid operational disruptions and maintain safe and comfortable working conditions. This project directly supports our strategic priorities of employee ownership and community value, ensuring that RTD facilities meet modern standards and remain reliable for both staff and service operations. This project is fully funded in this year's capital budget, and the work will be phased to minimize impacts on ongoing operations. As before, I'm joined by Assistant General Manager of Rail Operations, Dave Jensen, for any questions you might have for this team. Thank you.
Thank you so much. At this time, I would invite directors with questions or comments to go ahead and raise your hand. Director Nicholson, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Guzman. So I pulled up the scope of work in anticipation of this project because I wanted to get a sense of how we were going about upgrading our HVAC. And what I noticed, and you alluded to this Ms. Karma, sorry, is that we're looking at removing and replacing a hot water boiler and an air-cooled chiller, rather than installing a heat pump. And as I understand it, those hot water boilers and chillers are relying on fossil fuels, correct? Like those are gas powered, not electric powered boilers. And so I'm wondering, given the conversations that we've had on the board about, moving toward a more green, facilities, we're talking about our fleet transition plan to more green, energy there. It strikes me that this project is not doing that. Is that a fair characterization that we're still going to be relying pretty much as heavily on fossil fuels with the new installation as we were previously?
Chair, may I?
Yes, please.
So, Director Nicholson, the package comprises work at 3 facilities. Ilati, which is a very large facility of 125,000 square feet. Mariposa, where we are basically replacing the AC units in the computer room. And Security Command Center, which is a standalone building.
Yep.
So in the Security Command Center, which is a smaller building, we are going to heat pump technology with a little bit of backup for natural gas. During the design process, we did look at converting Ilati and all the facilities to all electric. There were technical reasons why we could not do so, but we did explore it. So part of it is the system capacity and all the other things that would need to be upgraded. But the new installations are compliant with the current energy and building and mechanical, electrical, plumbing codes. So to answer your question, we made it work at one building, couldn't make it work at the others.
Okay.
Within the constraints.
So I would just like to point out also, this potentially could be split into several parts, but in order to avoid the appearance of doing things at this dollar amount without coming to the board, staff has opted to bring this before us to receive our blessing, to do the corrective work for the staff and the employees of the agency to be able to continue their work and to safeguard our systems to ensure that we can provide the best value to our customers. So I do want to thank you for that, because there are, I'm sure, multiple options of ways to do this, but instead of doing that and then bringing 3 different options forward, you have brought them all to us at once to do this work in several places. And I admire that and I respect it, because it is something that we need to be informed of as we do these capital projects. So thank you. Director Nicholson, is there any more? I do have a committee member waiting to speak.
I can go after Director Catlin. So
you have the floor now. Do you have anything else?
Oh, yes, I do. In the process of, so these are some pretty extensive upgrades. You're removing and replacing 2 of the rooftop units at the Security Command Center. You're putting in a bunch of, very large, heavy equipment over at Ilati. Are there additional structural upgrades that, if you're going to be digging around and doing all of this stuff, I'm sure you're replacing some plumbing in order to do that. Are there opportunities for additional structural work that go alongside some of these upgrades that we're not, you understand the question I'm asking? Like, are we just doing the bare minimum of what's there, or are there things we can do to future-proof this? Or, you mentioned the fact that we can't, for technical reasons, move toward a greener, option with the boilers and chillers. What are we not doing? What are we leaving on the table in terms of being able to address at the same time as we're going about making these upgrades?
Chair, may I?
Mm-hmm.
So the units are heavy. They are on the roof. In Ilati, yes, we need more structural support. So the HVAC system consists of many components. Okay, so you have chillers, you have heating elements, you have dampers, you have pumps, compressors, and controls that control the entire system. So at this time, we are taking care of the major issues that we are aware of. What we are not replacing is some of the ductwork and components that we expect will last the life of the building. This was a thoughtful decision. It is very disruptive to work in a new facility. So our focus actually with this go around has been also with air quality in the building. So that is something that is we are doing with this iteration.
Madam CEO.
Sorry.
If I may, I think it's important to note, and I've shared this on several other occasions, as you look at our rail network, we have one operating facility. Recognizing that we pull vehicles in and out of a lottie, we have to ensure that we still are working in an environment where we can deliver service. So I wanted to state that for the record as well, because we're being very intentional as we leverage our transit asset management plan and look at renewals. And more to the point where you mentioned our facilities and fleet transition plan, we are doing assessments and we're leveraging that going forward. So I wanted to shore that up as well in the course of this discussion, because if we were to limit our ability to have people have access in and out of a lottie light rail operating facility, while we do have contingencies plans as it relates to a continuity of operation plan where there could be car storage at Mariposa where repairs are done, we are limited with one operating facility. Mr. Jensen, could you add or subtract from what I said from the operating vantage point as we talk about revenue service delivery, which is our core functional mission?
Go ahead, Mr. Jensen.
Yes, I can't overemphasize the importance of what Ms. Johnson just indicated. The potential to shut us down completely does exist. So it's imperative that we stay ahead of it as much as possible to be able to ensure that we can provide service. One other component that I might add, or maybe two, is that even locations where we might not be working on trains, the computer system and the SCADA system, which is our computer system that monitors our train activity, if that overheats and shuts down, we are again shut down. So that's incredibly vital. And then just as it relates to our employees and the importance to them working in conditions where they can be comfortable and work. As we all know, we have extreme temperatures here. And if you're working in a shop building and it's extraordinarily hot or extraordinarily cold, that hinders our employees as well. So I think there's a number of things that could be emphasized as it relates to this project that might be helpful for you.
One last question.
Last one.
Yep. You mentioned that these improvements are specifically to focus on or dedicated to air quality improvements, but I don't see anything on here about installing air quality monitoring within the facility as part of making these upgrades. Are there already high quality indoor air quality monitors at Ilati, for example, or can we get some of those in the facilities to go along with these improvements?
Chair, may I?
Yes, please.
So the air quality improvements are a part of improving ventilation in the building.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an integrated package. I believe the building has sensors. If not, I mean, we can, it should be part of it. So having sensors is normally part of our building. And we'll take a look at it. Right now, I'm told there are no air quality sensors in the building. So, sorry.
Awesome.
Thank you. I am going to move on to the committee members. Director Catlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say, Ms. Vishwakarma, thank you for at least looking at the possibility of a heat pump solution for all of the buildings. And I do understand the challenges of, and I'm sure Mr. O'Keefe does as well, of trying to move toward those types of solutions for larger commercial buildings. I think the importance that we have here is the safety and comfort of our employees, and given that it's only the Alati facility is a single facility, I just think it's imperative that we move toward that. I would just say to Director Nicholson that let's not let perfect be the enemy of the good. This is an important project and we need to move forward with it. And just on an added note, my twin brother is an HVAC engineer and he installs systems like this all over. He's been part of the American Society of Heating, Ventilating, and Air Conditioning Engineers, ASHRAE, whatever, and has taken a careful look at the conversion of some of these large commercial buildings to meet the zero greenhouse gas emission standard. And he has been telling me of the challenges associated with that in the industry. So I can definitely appreciate the challenges that you had, but do appreciate that you have taken a serious look at it and are moving forward with the best solution possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Peña, your hand shot up.
Yes, I do want to clarify is that, yes, I hear you, Director Nicholson. I think it's a challenge that we face as an organization on how to do that balancing act of maintaining our levels of service, keeping our employees in the best working conditions, but at the same token, do the opportunities for those modernizations when needed, right? And it's a balancing act. I think one thing that we are committed as one of the things since I've been here on board is seeing the team being very engaged when they're going through those assets to see when that applies to, when we can't, right? So I just want to tell you that we are committed to be always, every time that we're making these informed decisions, we have taken into account what else we can upgrade for the future. What it comes to light sometimes is, can we, and how does that not jeopardize what we need to do to maintain level service today? So it's a balancing act, but it's something that we'll continue to be looking at every time that we're doing any capital improvement.
Thank you. Director O'Keefe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This isn't why I raised my hand, but I am really excited about the prospect of pro bono work from Director Catlin's twin. I mean, this sounds great. I wanted to put a pitch in for being able to tour this facility. It comes up a lot. We have 7 new directors that I think would benefit from a tour. Probably the directors that were here before this here too, but is something that I'd like to. I'm a visual person. I'd like to see it and better understand kind of what we're doing and the workforce conditions, which is really important too. So that just a pitch for maybe a committee or full board field trip. Thanks.
Madam CEO.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to take this opportunity because just engaged with the chair just earlier this afternoon on this. We are working as relates to tours quite naturally. We want to ensure that we are leveraging staff time and making sure that you all can see the operations of a commuter rail facility, a light rail facility, a bus facility, keeping in mind that most of what goes into that work happens in the early hours or the late hours, and we want to ensure that we have staff available so you can see that. So just want you to know that I'm speaking with my operations team tomorrow about this subject, and we're looking at times in July, August, and September. So I just wanted to put that forward so everybody had that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
That's really great. I grew up near Ilati, and so I would love to go see it as well. I will say I have toured the Platt Street Division a couple of times for different events with staff and with help. But I would never assume to go to any of those places without a guide because they are really dangerous. And I got lost trying to find the bathroom in one of them. And thank God there was somebody there that was like, no, director, you got to go the other way. You're going to fall into a pit. So please let's not go on our own without talking to staff first and making sure that we're safe. I am so sorry, Director Nicholson. It is 6:45 and I need to move on. You've had your opportunity to speak and we need to make a vote, but thank you. Follow-up should be sent directly to Mr. Peña, or you can send me an email and I will make sure that we get it answered promptly. Are there any no votes on this recommended action by the committee members? I see none. That passes 7 votes to the aye, 0 noes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Time for discussion items. We are going to move on to our discussion items. There are 2 on tonight's agenda. The first item is for the 2025 Q1 financial update. Super excited to invite our Chief Financial Officer, Callie Mackey, to present on this item. Ms. Mackey, the floor is yours.
Ms. Mackey,
You
you're
are on mute.
Thank you, Chair Guzman. Good evening. I'm glad to be here tonight. Each month, a financial status report is included in the board briefings. This report displays a dashboard with sales and use taxes, ridership, and fair revenue results, as well as the unaudited financial statements. And following the conclusion of the fiscal year ending in December, an annual comprehensive financial report is produced, audited by the independent auditors, and is presented to the audit committee and full board as a recommended action. But today, we're discussing the Q1 2025 financial update to provide an update to the Finance and Planning Committee regarding RTD's financial results and position through the end of the first quarter, March 31, 2025. We have not yet received April sales and use tax amounts, and the April financial results will be available soon. All right, so most of this discussion is not only to provide an update, but also in preparation for the coming items, including the discussion next month on the 5-year financial forecast. We'll be coming back in September to ask for approval of that 5-year financial forecast, and then go into budget discussions for 2026. First, we will review actual Q1 2025 results versus budget and then versus prior year. Figures here are in thousands of dollars, and this view shows the variances of actuals to budget and year over year in gray. So fares of $13 million were $931,000, or 6% unfavorable to budget, and grew $117,000 over Q1 of 2024. Sales and use tax of $197 million was $6 million, or 3% unfavorable to budget, and grew $1 million over prior year. Keep in mind that the budget was approved by the board in November for 2025. Grants have been delayed primarily on the federal side and are currently expected to catch up later in the year. Grants revenue is at $3 million versus a budget of $87 million, and we'll continue to monitor this. We generally spread the budget for grant funding across several months, and then it depends on when the application is approved and when we can start drawing money down with funds released. So we expect to make up this difference later in the year. Other revenue, which includes advertising revenue and investment income, is at $22 million versus a budget of $11 million, and is $6 million, or 40% ahead of prior year. Operating expenses are to the good at $294 million, or $143 million, favorable to budget and above prior year by $12 million. There's favorability versus budget nearly across the board in operating expense areas, including bus and rail operations, planning, capital programs, police, and administration. Debt service of $32 million is $4 million favorable to budget and close to prior year. Capital expenditures of $4 million are $5 million favorable to budget and $13 million favorable to prior year. Overall, we're in a good financial position coming out of Q1, with change in net position of $67 million favorable to budget, and we will continue monitoring as the year progresses. So moving into financial position, these are the results of money in and money out and ending balances as of March 31, 2025 versus March 31 of 2024. A critical component is what's available to RTD potentially to spend before subtracting all liabilities and other obligations, and it's down $148 million, or 6% from the prior year. Cash, investments, and accounts receivable is our liquidity position and how much liquid funds are available for RTD to spend. Cash and investments are down 20 million or 2% from prior year, and accounts receivable is down 30 million or 14%. Fund balances are what's left over after we subtract out everything that's due as liabilities. The Fast Tracks Fund declined 29,000 or 10% in restricted funds, contributing to the Fast Tracks Fund balance decline. And the Base System Fund balances are unrestricted with 82 million or 12% decline from prior year. To summarize what I've discussed so far regarding financial results, revenue is behind expectations due to the timing of grants. We do have a positive expenditure variance offsetting the revenue shortfall, and we do have a strong, though slightly declining financial position. Next, I'll go over some historical trends. These graphics are actually included in the monthly financial statements that you have seen. The far left numbers start in 2018, and the red and the green lines start below 0 in 2018. At that time, we didn't have enough money to pay off all obligations if they were to come due at that point in time. It doesn't necessarily mean we were bankrupt because some of these obligations are way out into the future, but it's very important not to be in a position where the fund balances are negative. The top line, the blue line, is the trends in our cash and investments. But what you can see with the red and the green lines is we've markedly improved as an agency our fund balances while also improving our cash and investment position. So when we talk about being in a strong financial position, this is indicative of that, even though you can see a slight decline since 2023. The flip side of the coin, when you look at our balance sheet, is what do we owe? If you go back in time to 2016, this graph starts to show a nice trend of 8 or 9 years here. This graphic shows the big obligations that RTD has. In the blue section is the total debt profile, everything in the principal amount of debt owed to our investors that was borrowed in 2016 is 3.9 billion. And then the other large obligation that was on our balance sheet at the time of the pension, at that time was pension liabilities of 320 million in the green box at the top. So you can see that starting in 2021, we start to see significant decreases in those amounts, and we're left with a current outstanding principal balance of 3.3 billion at the end of Q1 of 2025. Part of that is actual debt service that's been paid, but a lot of it's also due to the debt refinancings that has occurred in more recent years when we had the opportunity. We refinanced debt for interest savings, took out some of the principal balance at the same time, and reduced the risk to RTD. The pension obligation is 154 million, down from 320 million. You may recall in 2022, with the new collective bargaining agreement, the Amalgamated Transit Union and RTD worked together to try to address the large pension obligation, and the pension plan was closed to new employees for represented employees going forward in 2023. And there was also a large payment of $160 million, a lump sum put into that plan and reduced the risk profile to RTD. So moving into fund balances, we have this broken down by types of fund balances. The fund balances are RTD's assets minus its liabilities. The fund balances are also known in the private sector as owner's equity. It's essentially the savings that are left over if RTD were to pay off all of its obligations. We have a column for base system, a column for fast tracks, and a gray column for total, followed by where these were in the prior year and the year-over-year variances from March 31, 2024. We have restricted fund balances that are restricted by contracts and agreements, such as debt agreements. That's money that has to be set aside to service debt, for example. We have a restricted TABOR reserve that's required of all governmental agencies in Colorado to maintain a 3% TABOR reserve. And those funds showed here as 133 million are essentially untouchable for covenants. And then we show the funds that fall under the board auspices, which are the remaining funds after removing restricted reserves. Through fiscal policy that the board has approved and through discussion, there are essentially 4 different fund balances. The words fund and reserves are really interchangeable here. So the operating reserves have been established as 3 months of operating expenses, excluding depreciation, which is $301 million. Next is the capital replacement fund. Through the budgeting process, while we all have this good cash position, we identified $261 million to set aside for capital replacement. That has to do with our state of good repair, the transit asset management plan, and having that funding available so we do not have to, in the short term at least, borrow money and pay additional interest. We currently have $192 million in the Fast Tracks internal savings account known as FISA, and that is a fund balance established by the board several years ago to put money away for future Fast Tracks projects. And finally, there's the unrestricted fund balance, which is a credit balance of $56 million, primarily due to the delay in 2025 grant revenue. And this balance had $596 million set aside in Q1 of the prior year, in part due to timing, but this was down to $58 million by the end of 2024. So again, restricted are contractual or statutory requirements such as TABOR, and all of the other items are under the board auspices. The board has the authority to spend, and only the board can appropriate those funds. As you know, the Fast Tracks program was approved by voters in 2004. As part of that ballot measure approved for RTD, there was a financial plan in which Fast Tracks money has to stay separate. The only exception is that in the initial Fast Tracks plan, it was agreed that Fast Tracks would pay or reimburse or pay the base system for any additional bus feeder service or paratransit service that was contemplated by adding new rail lines. So it's essentially Fast Tracks service, but because it's provided by the base system to service the Fast Tracks elements, it was determined to be a Fast Tracks cost. So therefore, Fast Tracks must pay base for that. So in this initial Fast Tracks plan, the original assumption was that there would be a 1% growth in revenue hours of that bus feeder service and the paratransit service that's being subsidized or paid for by Fast Tracks, and a 1% growth in the revenue hours year over year based mainly on population growth. In 2012, there was a lot of discussion about RTD's ability to identify enough funding to complete the rest of the Fast Tracks elements, and the result was that the board at the time established the Fast Tracks internal savings account, FISA. That FISA account identified specific line items that were potential revenue sources to put into a fund, the FISA fund, and keep building that until enough money was available to build additional Fast Tracks items. The primary source of that funding is approximately $22 million per year, and it's associated with that 1% annual growth. As it was identified that instead of doing 1% revenue hour growth, we have Fast Tracks pay the base year over year increases according to CPI inflation. And then we changed from a volume calculation per board direction down to a percentage increase based on inflation. So the difference between those two is approximately $22 million per year, which stays in the FISA. So this is what the FISA statement looks like in the monthly financial statements. You can see that the Fast Tracks internal savings account balance at the very bottom is $192 million. At the top, the limit Fast Tracks funding increases for budget and paratransit to CPI is at $22 million for the 2025 budget. Many of these items were identified at the time of creation of FISA around 2012 and 2013. So some of these items were one-time expenses one-time items such as Union Pacific Railroad and achieving project underruns. Probably one of the most notable items in the top section is the total sources of cash, is that any land or sale or lease revenue that comes into the agency, whether it's Fast Tracks or base system, goes into the FISA, and it's been a few property sales essentially. You can see all the sources that have come in, total $250 million plus $22 million in the 2025 budget. And then right below sources is the actual funding uses that have been approved by the board through the years. $6 million was used for additional scope items for the US 36 BRT, for the Fast Tracks Flatiron Flyer. North Metro project draws were $22 million, and Southeast Rail Extension was $22 million as well. In the 2025 budget, we also have listed $22 million for FISA debt service that RTD agreed to. 61 million debt service and operations funding is spread over 3 years, 2025 through 2027, which has to do with the Denver Transit Partner Project Eagle through P3. If you look all the way through 2040, it's estimated that the balance in the FISA would be 527 million in the bottom right, barring any changes to this approach. So finishing up here, some of the challenges going forward are revenue diversification, something RTD should continue pursuing and monitoring. Tax collections have slowed and are expected to have small growth in the coming years. One of the biggest commitments that's not necessarily shown on our financial statements is maintaining our assets in a state of good repair. So when we bring the draft 5-year financial forecast, you will likely see much of those fund balances will be consumed by maintaining our assets in a state of good repair. And if you look at our financial statements, it looks like we have a lot of money, but essentially it's spoken for. We really need that to maintain what we have. And lastly, RTD and our Human Resources Department have done a fantastic job bringing people in, and that staffing growth is going to be very important as to how we ensure we're staffing in the right areas in coordination with our planning. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation for the Q1 financial update.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mackey. Director Larson, your hand was up first, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to know kind of in brief, why are we so favorable in terms of expenses?
Ms. Mackey.
Yes, in general, we budget based on appropriations and what we see as to coming, but sometimes the teams do not spend all the funds available to them. And so there ends up being a favorability, especially in the beginning of the year.
That will probably balance out over the rest of the year, I would imagine. We're in a good spot now. Let's enjoy it. We'll see what happens. Anything else? All right. Vice Chair Banker, please.
Okay, thank you, Kelly, for your first financial report. It's good. Of course, it's all good news. I do have questions. If you go to your page 4 on your PowerPoint, you've got columns there that say budget. How do you come up with those numbers? Do you just take the annual figure and divide it? Or is it actual real life calculations based on what has happened? Because I'm sort of surprised to see the budget because, again, you know, I could see a percentage of budget spent. Yep. And I think what's most valuable, at least to me, is comparing the actual for the first 3 months with the prior year of the first 3 months. So that's what I'm focusing on. Because as you had mentioned, when you were talking about grants don't come in equally every single month. You know, they fluctuate a lot. Sometimes you get a whole lot of money and sometimes you get nothing. And so I'm just wondering about that budget column. Do you know how that was calculated? So I've just completed my first 4 weeks with RTD. Oh, I'm sorry. And my understanding, though, and what's typically done is teams try to allocate budget funds according to the month and the quarter, with some exceptions. There are some instances where RTD may have spread things through the year, and some instances where they may have been spread based on how expenses were expected to flow through. And so for RTD's typical practices, though, I believe that in Q1, sometimes what we experience is that budgeted funds are not fully spent early in the year and ends up coming later in the year. Yes. And so, yeah, and we can certainly talk. What I also found very interesting was on page 5, the amount of cash that we have invested, $2.4 billion, which is almost, I was surprised to see that large amount. I'm assuming the largest chunk is probably set aside because when we appropriate capital funds, we don't spend them out right away, but we take the money and we set it aside for that particular capital purchase.
We also have 3 months of operating expense that
Right.
we have to ensure we have coverage for,
Uh-huh.
as well as debt service that's coming up.
Okay, because again, to go from, because, I knew we had about $1 billion in 4 different kinds of reserves. And then to see the 2.4, you sort of do a double take. But that's good. But again, I'm assuming a lot of that is, over the years, you appropriate monies for capital projects and you just set the money aside. But okay, hopefully it's being well invested. And hopefully we're, going to be seeing the results of that. And then really the only other thing that I've got, it's a simpler comment with regard to your fund balances. I know you're just giving us a snapshot for Q1, but again, a lot of things can happen or not happen in the first quarter. And so some of these numbers, they're interesting, but by year's end, they can be very different. Okay, I'm sorry. And at some point, I'd like to talk to you about the Tabor Reserve, because there's a lot of things that you can do with that. My background is in state budgeting, and the state came up with some innovative ways to account for the Tabor Reserve. But thank you. I do appreciate the work that you've done, and I know it's a very, very complicated position that that you're in right now, and there's so much to learn. And if there's anything that we can do to help you, and I thank you very much for this report. I just had some general questions, and I'm sure over the year I will be bugging you on a routine basis, trying to dig into some of the numbers. But thank you for your work.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your comments, and I look forward to connecting much in the future, for sure.
Thank you. Director O'Keefe, you are next.
Thank you. That was a really good briefing. I really appreciate it. Very clear. One question, do we pledge any of our federal grant money that is, repetitious or more regular against any of our debt obligations? Is it pledged at all?
Deborah, would you like to speak to that? You're shaking your head.
Yes. Hi, Deborah Johnson. No, we typically do not do that as it relates to the monies that are earmarked from 5307. They're designated for specific purposes. And when we look at preventative maintenance and the other capital aspects, that's what we're leveraging those monies for as we do our drawdowns.
Thank you. I feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Director Catlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Ms. McKay, thank you for a very, very clear and succinct presentation. I really appreciate it. Well done after 4 weeks. It's not an easy job, and I just wanted to compliment you on your presentation. And as you know, the board created the FISA, and the board has the ability to modify the FISA. So as we look forward with some of our challenges, I know that some of us would appreciate a more in-depth discussion on uses for that or on what we can do with that, but particularly in light of some of the expectations from external entities. So I just wanted to make a comment that we're probably not done with that, but it was a very good and clear presentation tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Real quick before I go to Director Rusha, I agree with that very statement, Director Catlin. I would like to have further conversation regarding the FISA. I think it's really important. Director Rusha.
Thank you, sir. That was one of my 3 comments. You and Director Catlin beat me to it. In addition, I think that it might be prudent for the whole board to get some of the more recent memos that returning members have relative to the FISA, its history, how it's funded and how it's been funded since its creation. it goes into a bit more specificity, excuse me. I know ones were sent in 2021 and 2023, and last year during our budget season, for those who were interested, like more granular information was also provided upon request. So I don't want to voluntold anybody, but perhaps that's something that you, Mr. Chair, could work on with Mr. Kroll, just to kind of get us up to speed before we revisit this topic holistically. So that'd be a comment. And to on the topic of the FISA, my other comment was just like, as you can see in slide, I'm sorry, it's not packet page, but the presentation slides like 11 and 13, that fast tracks was supposed to contribute to the base tax, and that was, as Ms. Mackey noted, to account for increased bus demand and pay for feeder service, but the board voted to change that calculation, and that policy initiative by the board has resulted in a considerable amount of money being diverted into the FISA that actually would have gone to the base, and that also would have included money set aside for paratransit, which has been a topic of late. So I just wanted to put that out there, just to say that, yeah, I just want to put that out there, and I think it's a conversation that is worth revisiting. And so with that, Mr. Chair, my question would be to you, if you could just walk us through briefly, either confirm or explain how the process is going to work with our fiscal policy this year in FNP, and when board members can expect to have that conversation come up and contribute to that, because that is also related to our fiscal policy that we vote on every year in the fall.
Okay.
Thank you.
According to our work plan,
Yeah.
which we will be discussing later in the meeting, the fiscal policy for 2026, I assume that's what you're talking about. The
Yes.
first discussion opportunity will be in September. We will have discussion and opportunity to opine and request changes to the fiscal policy from September to October. In October, we would potentially be taking action on that and then recommending something to the board. So we will have our first opportunity to have discussion on that in September, according to the work plan. Director?
Thank you, sir. So just recognizing that we often have the discussion item and the vote, and it's like a 1-2 punch within 30 days, would it be okay if for those if folks are thinking ahead, would it be okay for us to start sharing our thoughts about potential changes or considerations to fiscal policy early? And if so, who would we direct that to? How would you prefer that to go, for efficiency's sake?
So if you're referring to updates to the 2025 to 2026, I would say go ahead and email those to me. And then I can meet with CFO Mackey and CEO Johnson and have a discussion regarding the same. There's no deadline on that, but if you do send it to me, please send it with the regard line specifically to the fiscal policy for 2026 so that I can quickly find those in email and pull those to the side. It probably would be best to CC our CFO and our CEO. Is that okay, Deborah? Sorry, just getting the head nod. That way.
Yes, sorry.
That way the three of us are all on the same page in case I miss one, but we can circle back and have a conversation. That is not to the exclusion of the vice chair either. Vice Chair Banker, we will do it, but open meetings and not trying to violate Cora. I'll take the direct on that and then share with you after I have a compilation, if that's okay. I've done the same thing on performance and that seems to work well.
Thank you.
All right, Vice Chair Banker.
Yes, I really would be appreciative if you could send me some of that information then too, because putting together the FY26 budget, we're going to be starting, and I'm sure our staff has already started, quite frankly, putting it together, and it's going to be lots of work, but I think it's also going to be very interesting, and hopefully we're going to have some good things showing up in 2026. But the reason I raised my hand here is one, Ms. Mackey, first of all, I have to apologize. I should not have been jumping in with some of these technical questions right away, but I do want to compliment you on your fiscal report, and thank you, because for only having been here a month, you've done a very good job, and you're picking up the intricacies of RTD finance very, very fast. And so thank you. I just wanted to make sure I thanked you for your hard work. Take
You're
care.
too kind, Director Banker. Thank you.
Okay, well, directors, if there are further questions or conversation on this matter, I would really highly suggest we send those to the board office. They will help us coalesce and get any other concerns to our CFO and CEO on this matter. But I do want to thank you for the high level and very succinct report. It's much appreciated, and it follows board policy, which I really do appreciate. It is 7:16. And for the sake of our transcriptionists and everybody assembled, since we've had some back-to-back meetings, I am going to adjourn for 10 minutes this meeting. Recess this meeting for 10 minutes. Let me be clear with my language. We will stop the recording, but we are still live streaming, so please be mindful, mute yourselves, and you can feel free to turn your cameras off. Let's return at 7:27. Thank you. Friendly 1-minute warning. Let's go ahead and start the recording. Thank you so much. We are reconvening the Finance and Planning meeting at 7:27 p.m. All right. Our second item for discussion this evening on the Finance and Planning Committee is the 2026 Budget Development Update. Once again, I would like to ask Kelly Mackey, our Chief Financial Officer, to present on this item. Ms. Mackey, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Guzman. All right, also with us this evening is Todd Nickel, our Senior Manager of Budget, here to help answer questions at the end. And I'll give an overview of the budget development update as we are full into the process for the year. We will go over the 5-year financial forecast, the 2026 budget, as well as typically there's a long-range plan that's done toward the end of the year. These include, and this discussion will include objectives, inputs, and framework with assumptions for how we'll go about the process for the rest of the year, aiming toward November approval of the 2026 budget. And this process will have goals of transparency, alignment, and strategic inputs throughout the organization. This is a view of what the budget timeline looks like with key milestones for the 2026 budget. Earlier in May, we finished prioritizing capital expenditure requests with the organization. Selection of CapEx and operating expense to align to the target 5-year financial forecast is underway right now. And the leadership team will soon align on the 5-year financial forecast and major expenditures associated with that. And then in July, we will present a draft of the 5-year financial forecast to the Finance and Planning Committee for approval in the month of September. And then in October, we will present a draft of the 2026 budget and post for public inspection by October 15th. And then in November, we will seek approval of the 2026 budget and review the long-range financial plan, is currently the plan. And then the 2026 budget will go into effective January 1st. The key objectives for budget development are aligning resources with strategic priorities, ensuring financial sustainability, addressing known risks and investment needs across the organization through alignment and communication, as well as complying with fiscal policies set by the board and reserve targets. We obviously have operating reserve of 3 months. We have 1.2 net revenue coverage that we will aim to hit with the 5-year financial forecast. Some of the other inputs driving the budgeting process are for the FIFE, the revenue projections, the transit asset management plan and capital projections, labor cost trends, and operating expense baselines. We have strategic priorities that will make sure that the line items are aligned to and articulate clearly what each of those strategic priorities are. And then we also factor in things like inflation. We have 3% inflation assumption currently, 3% tariff on materials and supply costs currently in the budget. And then department inputs from earlier this year are included in the FIFE review. We obviously also look at legislative impacts, as you know, and other variables for the department input process. The overall budget framework and assumptions focus on revenue growth and constraints. We have low single-digit fare revenue growth, negative sales and use tax projected for 2025 with small increases in future years. We look at grants, formula, and discretionary salary and benefit inflation, we're showing currently 5% increase on wages, 3% increase on salaries, 5% increase on fringe. And then we have fuel, materials, and utilities estimates, as well as debt servicing and capital funding needs. We have that 1.2 coverage for debt service, and part of the plan, for example, calls for financing bus purchases. And then we have a strategic committee discussion point section where I wanted to ask you if there's any directional priorities or trade-offs that the committee would like considered. We can maybe discuss this at the end. We'd love to hear from you. Areas where you would like to see financial flexibility in the 5-year financial forecast and the 2026 budget, as well as any risks or external signals that you, the board, are monitoring that should be integrated by my team and the leadership of RTD into the 5-year financial forecast on the budget. So then overall next steps will be that we will share a draft of the 5-year financial forecast in July, along with some of the key assumptions and methodology, and walk through that with you. We may actually do 2 different scenarios. We will finalize the 5-year financial forecast with approval in September. And then the staff at that time will be completing the budget development efforts across departments. We'll be meeting to review line items and building out appropriate detail for the budget book that will be published going into 2026. We'll hold a series of internal budget review meetings to ensure that we are aligned and we have the proper approvals among the teams. We will return to the committee with a draft of the 2026 budget in the month of October. And then we will come to the board in November of this year for approval of the 2026 budget. And Chair Guzman, that is the conclusion of my talking points for this presentation.
Thank you very much. All right, homework assignment, y'all. So we're going to jump into it. But the questions again, are there any directional priorities or trade-offs that this committee would like considered? Are there areas where financial flexibility is desired? Are there any risks or external signals that the board is monitoring that should be integrated? Now, we are one committee of the 15, and so help in communicating that question out would be a great assistance to our CFO and the team, but also I will ensure that those questions get sent out with the help of the board office for those that are not attending tonight's meeting. Director Larson, your hand was up first. Please proceed.
I've spoken to others about it, but I think definitely the consideration of trade-offs that I'm most interested in seeing is sort of the choices that we have sort of within the budget that we think we have to increase ridership versus to sort of maintain coverage. That's the trade-off I'm most interested in understanding better. So hopefully the budget process will allow us to investigate that. Thanks.
Can I ask you for clarification on that, just so everybody understands? When you say maintain coverage, what does that mean?
Well, I'd like to know if we could, I mean, we have a limited budget. Our goal, I don't know, well, our goal could be, the legislature's goal as they've defined to us in their most recent bill, is for us to increase ridership. And one way to do that would be to concentrate resources into the areas that have the highest propensity for ridership at the cost of areas or coverage or service lines that have relatively low ridership or are inefficient and have low ridership per dollar. And I personally would like to understand better what our options are there to concentrate service where it would give us the most bang for the buck and do the most for us to increase ridership.
Thank you. Vice Chair Banker.
Thank you. I would like to echo what Director Larson has just said. I'm not quite sure what information you received, Ms. Mackey, about our retreat that we had this past weekend. But we had a very good discussion about what our top priorities are for next year. In fact, that was the main reason why we had the retreat, was to have a good board discussion as to, what's some of the most important things that we need to be doing. And ridership kept coming up, and it was, at least in my committee and yours, Director Chair Guzman, ridership was definitely, sorry for the barking dog, ridership was definitely the #1 topic. So what we did not discuss, though, is how much of an increase for next year. Okay, Morgan? How much of an increase should we be budgeting for next year and in the next couple of years? In addition, one of the questions that I had when we had our pre-meeting was, I would really appreciate, I would like to what kind of, I'm sorry.
Okay, we'll come back if we're good. I believe I want to address the increase that was used because it wasn't clarified, and I think it might have been increased to revenue service hours or increased to funds to be able to provide more or a more robust policy or a more robust financing of increased boardings to our system. Is that correct?
I apologize for the barking dog. See what happens when we take a 10-minute break. I had to let them out, because they've been locked up for hours since we had 2 meetings prior to this one. It's basically, I'd like to understand, depending on what kind of ridership increases we're going for next year. I am assuming there are different costs associated with them. And I'd like to better understand how they're calculated. For example, if we increase the frequency of a rail line, is that cost different than perhaps starting a brand new route or adding trips? And so I don't know, maybe there's just a standard formula for all of that, but I don't know. And so that's some of the background information I would like to get. So thank you. Sorry for the barking dog.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Director O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I know I can speak for Chair Bouquet on this too. We're both very interested in finding some additional funding for the partnership program. I understand that all the money has not been used yet this year. However, he and I have heard together and independently a lot of interest from the communities to the south of Denver in pursuing that money. I think it's highly valuable in PR with our local governments. And, I think there's also helping them submit appropriate and approvable requests. But I think that having a bigger pool of money helps us draw more interest in pursuing the program. So I know I can speak for him on that, but that is an area we'd like to look at expanding.
Excellent. Thank you. Director Catlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do apologize because I was unable to attend the retreat due to long time, 6-month prior obligations. And so I don't know what the priors were for that. But my personal priority is to really take a look at the financial trade-offs of providing access on demand and paratransit service and increasing the eligibility and boundaries for that. So that's something that I would really like to see. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm taking notes as you're talking just to make sure I've got it down. Director Rusha, your hand was up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I concur about paratransit. This is the second time now that Dr. Catlin has beat me to the punch. Throws me off. So I have a comment and I was trying to type this out because I was afraid it would land incorrectly. So this might not be popular with some, but as a member of the body, I feel like if I feel strongly enough, I should say something. And as gently as possible, I just want to note that over the last several years, we have fallen away from visibility into our staffing overhead and labor costs. That is a bullet in the slide that we just saw. And while I don't disparage anybody for making a good wage, I think I would be remiss if I did not note that RTD is one of the most, if not the most generous employer, public employer in the state, and is also comparative with the private sector as well. And one of the costs that we incur for our salaried employees is 100% of their retirement contributions, and that is not an insignificant number. And so I think that the board, we need to have a conversation or have a look at that again, particularly if we're talking about trade-offs. It really pains me that we are talking about making drastic changes to paratransit for a couple $1 million without looking at some other potential cost savings. And I'm not saying we put that on the backs of our frontline workers. And again, I don't disparage anybody for the wage you're making or the benefits that you have. But that is potentially tens of millions of dollars in cost savings if our salaried employees contributed just a little bit, not all of it, not even half, but just a little. So thank you in advance for being gracious for my comments. That's all. Thank you. And that was my dog.
So it sounds like looking at some of the total compensation for salaried members of staff as a consideration. That seems fair, and it is part of the fiduciary responsibility. So I see no problem with that. Director Nicholson, your hand was up next.
Yes, thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. So I have a couple of things to mention. First off, an even more welcoming transit environment. Security in particular has been the number one thing that I've heard from everyone in my community. And I think that, we have some real opportunities with our new chief to make some strategic, thoughtful investments into improvements in security and the other aspects of welcoming transit environment. And I'll be bringing some stuff forward later this year as a result of the Welcoming Transit Environment Working Group. Second, I want to echo what Patrick said. There have been a number of entities within District A that have expressed interest in the partnerships. I'd like to see some of that money used for building like transit partnership plans specifically, because I feel like that facilitates getting organizations, communities, neighborhoods, et cetera, to the point of being able to make those investments if they're not already there. So that would be a specific call out for like $1 million in that. And then the third one is, we have two key divisions within RTD that I think are meaningfully understaffed. And those are government affairs and the board office. And I think that, this is an opportunity in the budget this year to make significant increases in the capability of the board office to do some of the additional work. I'll be quite frank, we have a bunch of new directors now who like making requests of staff time. And I think that we need some additional staff within the board office to facilitate that. And we also have, a very small, relative to other entities in the state of our size, government relations team. We have one full-time staffer who's handling 55 jurisdictions and a bunch of other, legislators, everything. And I think we need to make the kind of investments necessary to offer the same kind of government relations power that entities like the University of Colorado does, which has a much, much larger team compared to us. So those are my priorities: security, partnerships, and then increasing the government affairs and the board office. Thank you.
Okay, but you don't get your own secretary, Director Nicholson. You are the secretary of the board, to be clear.
Yes.
Okay? You still have to share, which means you got to let the rest of us get a chance to bite at the apple, buddy. All right.
Absolutely. Deal.
Director Banker, your hand went back up. Go ahead.
Yes, it did. And this is more for Director Catlin. Peggy, I've been meaning to contact you actually because I've been approached by a couple of people to get involved with Access-a-Ride. And while this is not one of my part of my skill set that I can bring to RTD, I'd like to learn as much as I can. And I would like to also look at the rules and the boundaries that we use for Access-a-Ride, because I see in your district and probably also in my district and probably a couple of other districts, Access-a-Ride really isn't well known. And I've also been hearing of a lot of issues with it, trying to schedule and trying to get folks from point A to point B. And so if you're looking for any help on that particular issue, count me in.
Mr. Chair, if I might real quickly.
Please.
Thank you. It's just been top of mind for me, and I just think we as a board need to really look at it a little bit more broadly. So
yes,
thank you, Karen.
Of course, Becky.
To that end, Chair Rusha, in the Operations, Safety, and Security Committee, are we looking at this service in particular and the boundaries and issues like that? Is that not a conversation coming up on your work plan?
Yes, so tomorrow, join us tomorrow. Same time, different Zoom link. And so we'll be talking about paratransit legacy status as and I believe we expect to have a vote on demand in July. So please, members, continue to weigh in and share that feedback.
All at once and everything. Director Catlin.
It's a lot.
Thank you, but I
Sorry.
believe that our CEO has a comment.
Yes.
Yes, if I may, I just want to add just a little more context to what Director Rusha said about July. It's actually the program modifications as it relates to two issues regarding paratransit. So I just want to amplify what she said in the sense of, this is a critical issue. And when we were seeking guidance just 2 weeks ago, relative to deciding what we will do going forward with our paratransit programs, and would encourage all of you to lean in. And Director Rusha has been leading this charge, and Director Chandler has been a part of that as well. So I just wanted to share for those that may not be familiar, that have not participated in the Operations Safety and Security Committee. So thank you, Director Rusha, for shepherding this.
Thank you. Director Catlin, go ahead.
Thank you. And in the context of the Financial and Planning Committee, I just wanted to say that we kind of wanted to take a look at what opportunities we might have to expand paratransit and access on demand and other things and that would mean some financial and budgetary shifts. So that's really where I was coming from in the context of our financial and planning. That's all I had. I don't need me to protract this meeting any more than it needs to be.
No, thank you. I just knew that was also coming up on OSS's work plan immediately and imminently. So it's a both and a 1-2 punch, I think. So I do have a couple of things that I'll add. Director Rusha, your hand is still up. Was there more from you?
Yes, sir. I put it back up before and then you called on me about OSS. Is
Oh,
it okay?
sorry. Go ahead.
Thanks, sir. So, so moving forward, like when this, I almost said NTFP. I'm sorry. When the 5-year financial forecast comes back in greater detail, or we get closer to budget season, I'd just like to put in a request for greater visibility into our vacancies and budgeted positions. We have not been able to fill some of these budgeted positions, but they're in our budget, and so if that is, I think on a maybe like on a macro level, that you don't see that budget variability unless you're zooming in. And so I think it would benefit the board to have just more greater visibility. And to that end, and this is a bit of a piggyback on what Secretary Nicholson said, just an understanding. We used to get this in OSS, and I think it's moved to performance, but just generally, like, where are we short-staffed in what departments? Because that also helps manage the board's expectations, and it helps us understand where we are and what potential challenges that we might have relative to our goals and planning, whether that's something in OSS or something in FNP, which takes care of some of the longer range planning. So that's like, I know I'm not on this committee anymore, but I'm still a member of the board, and that would just be a request I would make with staff as we move into budget season. And then finally, I would personally be super excited, might even duct tape it to my wall in excitement. But if we could get that SIP book, our capital improvement projects book, out, even if it's a starting point and not the same level of product we would have next year, before the end of third quarter, I think that would also benefit the board as well and reduce some interference and questions as we vote on the budget in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam CEO.
Yes, just one bit of information I just wanted to share with this body, recognizing that conversations had ensued, at the performance committee that we had on Monday, June 2nd, whereby we had a question that was raised by Secretary Nicholson about our retention rates. That information is forthcoming. He and I had an opportunity to have our one-on-one, and I had spoken with staff relative to the data we were pulling together. So by week's end, there should be information relative to positions and things of the like. So I'm broaching that in light of Director Rush's comment that's forthcoming, because we wanted to ensure that we could provide year-over-year data. And I will state that our retention rate is on the rise. And so I think that's something great, but I don't want to speak too far out of school, but this full body, i.e. the board, will be receiving that information relative to how we're doing. And it's not just frontline represented positions as well. It speaks to those that are non-represented. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Here are mine, Ms. Mackey. I really do want to keep an eye on cost for facility and fleet transition, as we're under pressure from the state to be able to transition our fleets, but that starts with our facilities. So whether that looks like purchasing land, building a new building, whatever that entails, there's a whole process going on there. And I know that our CEO is on top of that part, but I think just looking out, that's going to be something we need to concern ourselves with in any budget going forward, particularly because I believe in the 7th generation thinking. It's not just us, it's the next 7 generations that follow. So how do we prepare for that? We are also currently engrossed in the bus stop I wanted to say investigation, but it's the bus stop, review of all of them that we have and what we need to take care of. And I think that infrastructure is really important. So I know that when we're talking about trade-offs or wise use of money, ensuring people have a safe place and a secure place to board with good wayfinding, shade, protection from the elements in our 4-season state, it's important. I do believe, given the report we received from the state demographer's office, we need to take special consideration for how we are going to serve our elderly community and our folks that are going to have needs that are not going to fall necessarily under ADA provisions, but just need to be thoughtful about how we approach that. but it does align with our ADA services and our paratransit services. One big concern that I have is that we are an older agency and we need to update technology. And we need to make sure that we are using state-of-the-art technology to be a state-of-the-art trusted transit system. Finally, I would say, and I'm not sure quite how this process works, but as chair of this committee, I want to ensure that board office staff, which is not normally under the regular agency guidelines, has the opportunity to provide their needs in the budgeting process so that we are ensuring our direct reports here in the board office have what they need to do their jobs and do them effectively for us and with all of the agency staff as well. That doesn't necessarily mean additional employees, although that's been raised, but it does mean when they have concerns, needs, or they have to procure items, that they have a budget to be able to do that with, that is not overlooked. I feel like sometimes I've gone through the budget and it seems like it's a little bit of a hit or miss on that particular item. So from a director looking out for the staff that does serve us and helps us do all of our work, sometimes those procurements cannot be delayed because we can't function properly as government without them. That's what I have. Does that satisfy your questions for now?
Yes, absolutely. And to add to the last point, I've already seen the start of some slides around board office requests and what can be funded to help facilitate discussion. So thank you. Thank you to everybody for your feedback. Appreciate it.
Great. Mr. Kroll, would we be able to send these 3 particular questions out to the members of the board that are not here and compile an email to send back so that CFO Mackey is not receiving 20 emails?
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. Sorry, my computer screen just locked on me. Give me 1 second. Okay. That gets us through our discussion items. So we are now on other matters. Director Rusha is the director for District B, where Central Park is located, and has requested, because she was attending to another elected official at the time that I called on her for comment on the previous matter, an opportunity to speak about the transit-oriented development that was passed out of committee. So I'd like to enter her comments into the record, although I know that Ms. Brady has gone home for the evening. You know, I'm certain that either between Ms. Johnson and Mr. Peña, we will be able to answer some concerns, and if not, we can certainly follow up with you, Director, in short order to address any concerns or comments you may have. And this does go to the board for further consideration. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Guzman. Gentle reminder on pronouns, but I appreciate it. So I just wanted to, and I also apologize, I had to step away earlier. Circling back to the Central Park project, to my board colleagues, I was listening really intently. I heard you, and I just wanted to quick offer some thoughts as a resident of this neighborhood and a high frequency user of Central Park Station. Like, so, eco passes were mentioned, and I just wanted to flag for everyone's consideration that if we have like a high number of AMI restricted units, an eco pass might actually prove to be more expensive for some residents than our live pass. And I think that's something that we ran into with airport workers, and sometimes we have the same issue with our college eco pass system. So just something to keep in mind. But I understand that, you know, staff will keep an eye on that. Parking. I know that like the west lot can look full when you approach, especially from the southeast end. But even pre-COVID, it never was. I'm at the station like 3 to 5 days a week, whether it's, you know, bus or car, there's room. I would not support the project if I felt it would impact airport travel, for example, and using our train. with that, I think that like the best way to ensure like maximum efficiency with this station is to build out our bus system. So Central Park, for example, has had a transit and bus plan for it's like 17, maybe 18 years old now, but it hasn't been fully built out yet, nor has our SOP been fully realized in this area. So I think, part of TOD is having those connections, and bus connections are still needed here. But with that, just pivoting to staff, and I understand some might have to be a follow-up email. I did have I've been tracking this one, and it was my understanding, like just for in order to score favorably, the developer needed to demonstrate financial capacity for their proposal. And so I don't know if I misunderstood the presentation, but it sounded like that might be a question. So just a comment, and I think, coupled with the fact that this was originally proposed as 800 units, and now we're at 500 units, and that will be done in phases. I'd feel irresponsible if I didn't flag it, and that's something I'd ask staff to maybe get us more information on as it comes time to close, particularly if we are now putting in millions of dollars. And I understand that agency wanted wide latitude. I am uncomfortable with this many unknowns, as you might have been able to tell from our last month's meeting. I wouldn't feel comfortable without having a little bit more visibility before this goes to a vote. And I understand why the PowerPoint was high level. So I was going to ask Ms. Brady or Ms. Johnson if it'd be permissible if I just reach out and get a one-on-one just to get a little deeper understanding, recognizing this is my district, my neighborhood, and I might lose my head with some constituency groups if I didn't. So I don't know if that puts our GM on the spot, but that was a request that I had. And yeah.
Yes, most definitely. Ms. Brady offered that up because I know there's a lot of interest in transit-oriented development, and there could be a myriad of questions. As this is a topic in which there's a lot of interest, and some may not be as familiar. So yes, that's totally permissible as we go through this. If you could just, ensure that you copy Anhil and I, so Ms. Brady has an understanding that it's all good in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, if I may quickly.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, GMCO Johnson. I appreciate that. So with that, this would be helpful for me. Maybe others would find it helpful as well. I didn't, from my perspective, didn't see a whole lot of difference between the presentation, except for maybe the phases from the first, or I say the last, not the first, the last time this was brought to committee and the board approved it, and this time. So I understand some that might be granular, but for those who are really interested in transit-oriented development and the future, it might be helpful to have sort of like a chart, especially because we're now considering discounts that weren't necessarily on the table before. So I just wanted to put that out there. Maybe that's something I can discuss in a one-on-one, but I thought that might be helpful for others as well. Now I do have 4 questions, very specific questions. The first is, can I just get confirmation I understood correctly that our ground leases will have covenants with them that extend for the full duration of the lease? Or that could be a follow-up answer.
It may need to be a follow-up answer at this point, but I will make sure that I take note of it and we will get an answer to you promptly.
Thanks, sir. Sorry, is it okay if I?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll also send you the questions I have in front of me. The next one I had was just if the agency could help us understand how we are going to be able to track or ensure that the developer is meeting their end of the literal bargain, the literal bargain. I noted I live in Central Park, and like when the city gave up quite a bit of land, to build this out, one of the expectations was that we would have a certain level of affordable housing, and we are 20 years out and that was never met. And so just understanding what kind of checks that we have to ensure that, you know, especially this is a very long lease, that that they're meeting their end of the bargain, would be helpful for me and maybe my colleagues. Specifically, I had a question about how many accessible units the building will have. I assume per our new policy, they'll at least meet HUD guidelines, but any more visibility into that and what the developer has planned would be helpful. So that could be a follow-up. And then I kid you not, my constituents have asked this several times, and I feel like it's the right moment. So I don't mind passing it along, and I hope the chair doesn't mind. But what is the status of Balloon Man? Is he safe? And if you know, you know. I see the chair laughing.
I know
But
exactly what
I
you're
get
talking
asked all
about.
the time, and it just seemed to fit. So
For the directors that do not know what Balloon Man is, it is an art piece that is at Central Park Station, and
treasured art piece.
like all of our stations have distinct artwork. It is something that the community wants to protect. And so I'm sure that there's probably nothing wrong with Balloon Man. He will be safe and sound, but I will ask the question and we can follow up for sure. It may be a little silly, but our communities do really love their stations when they have one. So Mr. Kroll, I see your hand raised.
Beloved Balloon Man is back up. I ride by him every day, and I noticed when he was gone, and he came back maybe in the last month or two. Very squeaky clean.
Great. Director Rusha?
I guess I should specify, I saw him as well, but I just want to make sure that he's not going to disappear or anything with this new development or construction. We just want to make sure we keep him safe from any potential hazards. So for those of you who don't know, Balloon Man to Central Park is kind of like Lucifer at DIA to everybody else. Very sacred. And somebody asked, making sure he wasn't going to go away again. So I put it out there. That was definitely other matters. But thank you for entertaining me. And Mr. Chair, I wrote down my questions, so I'll just email them to you directly.
I
Thanks.
appreciate that. Thank you. And to the members of the committee, I appreciate your patience while we seek information and input from the director in whose district we just made a decision to the full board. So it is important that we respect each other, and I think that that is the kindest way to do it. All right, we have one last item to discuss, and I do need to beg your attention on this one, everybody, because we have had some major changes to our work plan. An email was sent out with the updated work plan to everybody, I believe, before the beginning of this meeting. Not yet? Okay, it will go out promptly afterwards, but we're going to discuss it now. So let me get this out of the way. The next Finance and Planning Committee meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, July 15th. And before we move to adjourn, we're going to pull up our work plan and check in on it. And moving forward, I would like to make sure we do this at the end of every meeting. We are members of a committee that has a lot of work to do, and so we should know this work plan better than anybody else. I literally sleep on 2 work plans at night to osmosize them into my brain and keep everything rolling. So, Mr. Kroll, would you kindly pull up the current version of the work plan? This will help us keep our focus through the end of the year, and the intention of the work plan per board policy is that this is the one location everybody should be able to check in on and see what we are working on and what is coming up in the future, so we can prepare the adequate amount of time to do our duty as directors. And so we are certainly committed to getting this through. Now, back in February, the committee met. We had 3 simple requests. That was for the items of a capital improvement plan report or book. We had a request for the real estate listing of the agency, and we had a request for fares collection from staff. Those 3 items are not going away, but some had to be moved in order to make space while there were transitions in the agency. Knowing that in July, this is what we're looking at. We have several staff actions that have been pulled over, a comprehensive operational analysis budget transfer, We will look at the staff action for the RFP for the new bus maintenance facility alternatives analysis and National Environmental Policy Act study. We will look at bus stop infrastructure accessibility assessments. There's a contract amendment that we need to consider there. We should be able to take action on the downtown rail reconstruction progressive design build contract award, the US 36 Sheridan Bus Bay expansion, and the East Metro hoist replacement and District Shops hoist replacement. All of these items are capital improvements or contracts that fall under our purview, so we're going to attack those. That's a lot of reading in detail, so thank you for being attentive to the homework and coming prepared with your questions. When these are put forward to the public, you can attack at will and start reading through them. And then if there are questions that we can try and get answered ahead of time, please feel free to email myself, send questions or inquiries to board office so that we can try and get all of this wrapped up and information into your hands as quickly as possible. We do have the pending discussion for the 5-year financial forecast from 2026 to 2030. And then we have the inventory of RTD properties that will be coming up as a committee requested item at the end of that meeting. It feels like a lot of work. It's one bite at a time, but if we are efficient with our time management, we should be able to get through all of that. And that is in July. Are there any questions about what is coming up from the committee members? And I can't see everybody, so if you have your hand raised, just go ahead and unmute and speak. All right, seeing none, then let's move on. I want to take a quick look at September as well. Sorry, Jack, if you pull that back up real quick. In September, after our break in August, we have staff action item for the 5-year financial forecast, which will have been discussed. We have a full 2 months to provide feedback on that from the first discussion. The staff recommended action to open payments and expand retail network fair equity analysis that will come to us from Carl Green, Civil Rights, and from Contracts. Monica Triple-Harnke will bring information about that. There will be a discussion about the 2026 fiscal policy that was requested earlier. So again, if there are comments that need to be made, get them to me sooner rather than later. Probably be beneficial to send that with including the CEO and the CFO on that email. A discussion about the 2026 investment policy, also heavy reading for September. And then committee discussions for fare box recovery opportunities and the committee discussion for capital improvement projects. Both are committee discussion items that were requested in February and will be completed in September. And I want to just thank staff for working with us to get all of this done in timely order so that we can then turn our attention to the most important work this committee does in terms of our annual cycle, which is turning back to our fiscal policy and budgeting that will be coming up immediately after that through the end of the year. That's what we will be focused on. So this will be sent out to all members of the committee, and the board will have insight into this. I will definitely make sure that I confer and share with the chair of Operations Safety and Security, Director Rusha, and make sure that we are in sync on that so that there's no missed opportunities. All right, now that we've outlined those items coming our way, any questions or comments at this point? Director Rusha.
Just wanted to say great work, and this is going to be a very hard act to follow tomorrow night. Thanks, buddy.
It's everybody working together. That's how we get it done. One RTD.
Jeff better help me out when we get to ours tomorrow. Good job.
Okay. Seeing no other discussion or comments, let's go ahead and adjourn. We will adjourn this meeting at 8:15 p.m. Thank you for coming prepared. Thank you for the hard work. Have a good night.